Record. Well, hello there, and welcome to the Spark Your Creative podcast. I am Sharon Burton. I am the CEO and founder of Spark Your Creative Coaching, and I am so happy that you're with me for another episode of the podcast. And we're still working with the theme of creating over 40. And this has been such a I guess like a blessing to me because I've actually connected with so many interesting people and folks that I've gotten to know online, offline, in line, whatever line. Um, and it's I think the interesting thing is I'm noticing, and maybe because I'm at midlife, there's a lot more interesting podcasts and people that are working with folks in my age group that are just so dynamic and powerful and really helping my generation and those ahead of me, and definitely a gateway for the ones behind me to live their best life. And I'm very excited that I have someone that I've been admiring for quite some time. I met her indirectly through another person, um, uh, and I was just sort of like, wow. When I started following her, it was like I felt like I was following myself, or at least the self that I wanted to show up to be. Okay, so. I do want to introduce her, and our topic again, which I have not shared actually, is owning our creative selves at midlife. And my guest today is Wendy Battles, and Wendy, and it's almost like she's. I think I mentioned this in another podcast. There's some people that are soul family. We may not know them directly, but there's something familiar about them that tells me on a maybe on a cosmic or spiritual level that we know each other and we respect, you know, each other's hustle, or we may have known each other in a different galaxy or something. I don't know. But anyway, let me just introduce her to you. And I think that you will find her to be quite an inspiration, and hopefully be able to get some nuggets of wisdom on the podcast today. Cybersecurity awareness expert at Yale University by day. Okay. Wendy Battles pursues her passion for celebrating, illuminating, and elevating midlife and older women by night. As the host of the Reinvention Rebels, I love that name, by the way, Reinvention Rebels, because that's what we are, Gen X podcast. Wendy interviews brave and unapologetic women 50 to 90 years young who have reinvented themselves later in life to see new possibilities. From starting a natural beauty brand for silver-haired women at 54 to traveling solo around the world with a carry-on bag at 60, launching modeling career at 72. These women are boldly making their dreams a priority and reality. Wendy shines a light on the notion that we can reinvent ourselves at any age or at any stage, and is helping to disrupt the limiting beliefs about the value of aging women in our society. At 59, which I keep telling her I don't believe that. Wendy is a reinvention rebel herself, having reinvented herself many times during her life, including as a management consultant, voice actor, and health coach. Her most recent reinvention as a podcast host is by far her most rewarding. Along with her journey of greater self awareness, she's learned the art of living on purpose, valuing her worth, and embracing life with more joy and ease and trust. So, welcome to the podcast, Wendy. How are you?
Sharon, I am great. And thank you so much for inviting me to join you for this, what I know is going to be an amazing conversation.
It always is. And So let's dig in and get started on our conversation. And what we're talking about is embracing our creative lives, our creativity at midlife. And I think I have the perfect person to talk about that. All right. Well, I did read a little bit of your bio, but share how you got to this portion of your life where you're working with midlife women. And I can see that you went a lot of different directions, much like me. But
Yeah.
how did you, and the people that you interview, I've listened to a few of your interviews, and they are quite interesting women. I mean, they are just doing some really fabulous things. So I'm just wondering, how did you land in midlife land as outside of aging to it?
Such a fantastic question. And I'm going to tell you short story. And the headline is My path in life has been very circuitous. And I have never been one of those people that knew at 18 or 22 or even 30, this is what I'm meant to do for the rest of my life. I spent a lot of my adult life searching for what is my true mission? What is my purpose on this earth? Why am I here? I think I'm here for more than just like working in some corporate job or, and I always was successful at what I did, but at the same time, in the back of my mind, there was always like, but what else? What is that thing? And I spent many decades trying to find that thing, Sharon. I've tried lots of things as you read about in my bio. So I'll tell you that in my 30s, doing one of my searches, I had had some surgery. I was off for several weeks. I was deep into what am I meant to do? And at that time, I thought of my personal mission statement, which is to speak, teach, motivate, and inspire. But I wasn't sure what that translated into. At that time, it was voiceovers. And I tried my hand at that, but it's pretty hard. It's like being an actor. There's a lot of rejection. I didn't have the wherewithal to really do it because it was like rough. I was like, oh man. So I gave up too easily. So, so I was still working, having a full-time job. But then in my 40s, I was like, okay, Wendy, listen, you really should figure this out. What is it? Like, there's something more you're meant to do. And at the time, I had a corporate job. I wasn't especially happy. My dad had passed away not that long before. So I was really in this searching mode again. And usually the common theme is when I'm in that searching mode, I hire a coach to help me uncover these things like you, right? I'd hire someone like you or I've hired career coaches and life coaches, you name it. So I was again uncovering things. And I realized I really was into nutrition because I'd gone to nutritionists to solve different health problems. And I thought, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do something around public health. Well, when I looked into it, either quitting my job and going full time or taking, I don't know how many years to get, a master's degree. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound like me. I don't want to do that. But I got onto this idea of nutrition, and there was this nutrition school, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition in New York City, and I live in Connecticut. So I enrolled there. I got the certificate in nutrition. I decided to quit my job to become a coach, which for Sharon honestly was not the best advised thing to do. I didn't really have a good plan. I was kind of like, well, it'll all work out. And
Uh-huh. Yep.
running a business though is more than it'll all just work out. And as I know it just takes a lot more time and care and feeding and development than I expected. And I also think I had this very naive idea that would be like instantly successful, which is kind of crazy because, like anything, it takes time and you have to plant the seeds and then you have to water those seeds and you have to let things grow and you have to cultivate them. And that's not like well, in a year, I think I'll be really successful kind of mode. But anyway, that was my 40 something reinvention. And I realized, so what I learned though is that I love working with women. So in that job, I worked with a lot of women around improving their health or working towards some health goals. And I loved this idea of empowering women. So I learned something from that. I learned something from also doing the voiceovers and I think started to see this pattern that using my voice was something important to my story and what I meant to do because I love speaking and inspiring people. But, now fast forward to my 50s, and I was like, okay, Wendy, this is it. You are not messing around anymore. Now you really need to figure out because I've been working in information technology for quite some time. And several years ago, I was like, this is it. I'm going to really figure out what I'm meant to do. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it, thinking about what I love to do, thinking about what energizes me, thinking about what brings me, joy that I do if someone
Mhm.
wasn't getting paying me to do it. All those kinds of questions. I got really curious. And one day when I was meditating, Sharon, so quiet because I started to do things really quietly, just like cooking in silence and cleaning in silence, and all, ideas started to come to me. So one day I was meditating and I heard these two tiny words, reinvention rebels. I was like, what? Reinvention rebels. So you know how sometimes something comes to you and you have the presence of mind to think, I better write that down
Yes.
because I probably won't remember it by tomorrow. So
Right.
something told me it just bubbled up from within. I wrote it down. I didn't at the time know what it was.
Hmm.
And to be honest with you, I've always enjoyed podcasts. I listen to all kinds of podcasts. I used to listen driving back and forth from work. I never imagined I would have podcasts. I was like, really? Like, but as I started to really noodle on it some more, I started to realize that a podcast would be an amazing platform to really share this idea of reinvention and that we can, at any age or any stage reinvent ourselves, especially in midlife. And it really blossomed from there. And I think what's different about this reinvention than all the other reinventions is the feeling that this is what I came here to do.
Yes.
And I didn't have that before. And so it's been such a joy to find something that lights me up so much. As much as I liked health coaching, it wasn't what I was truly meant to do. It was a stepping stone, though.
Right.
And I think that sometimes things don't work out and we get very disappointed or discouraged, but I feel like everything we do is all for our greater good, even though, of course, at the time we can't see it. But, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Wendy. Because I started off with what I do, you know, on the other side of the art game. I was an art curator, and I still do some curation, but not as much anymore. I was an art advisor, so I was working more with collectors and with artists, but in a different way, showing their work and getting their work out there and doing theme shows and selecting art for those shows and and it was an exciting thing because I got to know, about the art world, how it worked. I spent time at New York University through their art business program and going to the galleries in New York and going to the huge art fairs like Art Basel and, Frieze and all these other
Yes.
places. And it was exciting, but I knew that it didn't I had to, it took really a time where I had hurt my back. I had sciatica and I ended up flat on my back. And one summer in 2015, and I felt like I can't do this anymore. This is not quite what I need to do. And I had thought about creativity coaching, off and on. But I was like, oh, because sometimes we get caught up. Oh, this seems sexy. This is wild, And
Yes,
you're with the movers and shakers, at exhibitions and
absolutely.
these high end events and stuff. And you're meeting these wonderful artists and collectors and big, as I call muckety mucks, at the museums and all these people. But it was like it still wasn't what I knew I was about too. So I appreciate you sharing your journey because sometimes, and I felt disappointed that I wasn't, I didn't feel as successful with that,
Mm, yeah,
but I
I
also knew that
know.
it's a different kind of mindset and a different kind of support system that wasn't quite there for me for that. But I know one thing, and I know you probably feel the same way too. When you're working with people who are, trying to find their way, and for me creatively, I am just been, I feel like I'm so on purpose now. So,
Yes, me
it's
too.
fascinating. And even though you may have found your way a different kind of way, and, you may say, oh, I wasted all that time. And so there's a lot that we learned from those things. And
Yes.
I wouldn't take it from the world because I am, with what I do too, I'm able to help artists and people kind of understand that world too, because that can be very scary for people who are not into the fine art world. So
Great.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's really true. And I'll just add that one of the most important things I learned from the things that didn't work out
Hmm.
when I had unrealistic expectations of how it would go,
Me too.
right?
Hmm.
is is persistence. That if you really want to do something and you feel like you're meant to do it, it will happen. It might not happen, in the time frame that you want it to happen. Because, right, these things take time. Again, that care and feeding and cultivating, but that if
Absolutely.
you are really persistent, anything is possible.
Yes, and that's why I felt this was such a good topic for us today is embracing our creative selves at midlife. And because I've been working with a lot of people who are there or, going towards their older adult years. And, I think a lot of people are still hesitant to do something like creativity and to get to embrace that passion because it's different, right? A lot of us, and you probably understand this or like I did, when I was coming up, I graduated from high school in the mid 80s. So, nobody was talking about going to no art school unless you had parents and people that were into that. For
Yeah.
the most part, what was it? Business, engineering, sciences, healthcare, law.
Yes.
Nobody was saying do the art thing. And so a lot of us had to put it down, or we
Yes. I
did it.
totally hear that.
You feel me? And
I
so
do,
I'm,
girl. I do. It's like, that's not
yeah,
practical. Really, Sharon? You need to get a job when you graduate,
that's right. And
right?
I had, I was sat down and my dad was like, I think the art thing is cool. But basically, he said in so many words that if I'm going to pay for college, you know, you may need to go a different route. So I did. And,
Right.
you know, my thing is really trying to bring people back to giving them permission, because some people have gotten, you know, my dad was really cool about it, but not everybody's parents or the people around them were as supportive, or someone
Yes.
said something to them that made them feel that they should not embrace that part of them or that they were not talented or creative. So, do you feel that midlife is a good time to, you talk about reinvention. What do you feel about midlife being a perfect time for reinvention with your creative passion? How do you feel about that? Do you feel that's a good time? How would you address that with someone that's like in our age group that, wants to do these things, but feel that it's too late or they're having problems giving themselves permission to do so?
Sharon, I think this is one of the best times to reimagine our lives and dip into our creativity. And I think of it as a fresh start or the next chapter. And I say that because so many of us have been wrapped up with our families, our children, our work life, our community, whatever those things might be. And we often have put so much attention and focus and nurturing on everybody else and not nearly enough on ourselves. I feel like midlife, especially with the onset of perimenopause and menopause, which again is another opportunity to me to start fresh because you're relating to your body differently. Your body is changing, just like our ideas often change in midlife. Our perspective has changed. I know that many of us are in the position of being in the sandwich generation where we may have older parents or other relatives, because I've also done caregiving for people that weren't even related to me.
Yeah.
So, right? So you've got that. And then if you have kids or, godchildren, or you don't even have to be a mother to feel that, I think in the middle kind of thing where you're doing a lot of balancing. So it's again more attention on a lot of other people. But I think that when we can shine the light on ourselves, when we can, as you said, give ourselves permission to explore, to think about what would I like in my life? What could be different? Because midlife, we like half our life might be behind us, but then there's a whole other half in front of us. And that's, if we're healthy, a really long time. People are living a long time. My mom passed away about 6 months ago, and she was almost 91.
Oh, God bless her.
And
God
yeah, and until the last couple of years, very, very healthy. So
yeah.
it's a long time to be thinking about doing something. And I think as we also think about at some point we're going to retire, that we're going to have a lot more time on our hands to do some of those things maybe we haven't done. And so I think that if we can see midlife as a point of departure to create some of the things we'd like to do, we can kind of start down that path now so that when we get to retirement age, we can have a really vibrant retirement. We can do the things we love to do. We've really tuned into who we are and what we want. So to me, midlife is a great opportunity to dip into our creativity and to think differently, more broadly
Hmm.
about what our lives could be. And to me, it could be almost anything.
I think that you touched on some things there, because I've seen some people, and you probably are familiar with this too, that fear retirement. You can tell, they're ready. They're mentally ready. They just don't know it. And, probably financially ready, and but they're scared of it, and they don't want you to talk about it. They don't want you to bring it up. I remember somebody kind of fussing at me, and I was like, no, and nobody trying to run you out of here. But, it's just sort of like, well, what is, but I could tell there was sort of a fear, of getting out
Yes.
of, I'm working and this is my purpose. And you talked about purpose earlier. Because one of the things I do when I talk to and when I coach a lot of creative people is really getting in touch with what they feel their purpose is. And their purpose does not have to be, I am a so and so that works at so and so.
Right.
It's embracing their creative purpose, that there is a purpose for you to be a creative. And um, I wanted you to speak a little bit about that too, about how do you just like you went through your process to discover your purpose. How do you advise people to really delve into that and as it relates to their creative life? What does that process, what might it look like?
Well, I think that's a great question. And to be honest with you, Sharon, I think that there are a lot of parallels between reinventing oneself and dipping into our creativity. And I think and of course, first of all, there's no right or wrong answer, because we can create a process that works for us and everyone is different. But what I will say is that I think with reinvention, so much of what I work with people on is about this idea of reinventing from the inside out. How did I reinvent myself? Well, it came from within. These ideas bubbled up. And it was this wisdom within me. And you could call it God, you could call it the universe, you could call it my soul speaking to me. I mean, there's many different ways that we could kind of capture that idea. But for me, it's all about this idea that we are all deeply wise. We have this wisdom that often is trying to come out, but we're so incredibly busy running around, multitasking, doing all the things we do, trying to be all the things we are to all these different people, often not enough time for ourselves. And I think that whether it's about tapping into your creativity in midlife or it's about reinventing yourself in some way in midlife, that if we give ourselves permission. So it goes back to this idea you talked about permission. If we give ourselves permission to look within, to get quiet, to be more still, to go on solo walks in the woods where we really are tuning in to everything around us, or meditating, or just sitting quietly. I think that so much of uncovering what that creative spark could be starts with looking within ourselves. And that if we can get more quiet, if we can say, you know what, I'm going to take 5 minutes a day, or 10 minutes a day, or half an hour a day, or half an hour 3 times a week, whatever it might be, right? We all have our different boundaries. And I can start tapping into things, which could also be journaling. I mean, there's so many different ways I think that we can kind of uncover what's within. And again, there's no right or wrong way. It's whatever way works for you, but journaling, meditating, getting outside, being in nature, moving your body, doing breathing.
Mhm.
Uh, all of those things are ways that I think we can tap into what's within. And because I think that sometimes I get very much in my head. Like I'm a logical person and I logic things out and I, use all this reasoning about how things are going to work out. But I feel like things are definitely easier for me when I trust my heart instead of
Mm.
tuning into
Mhm.
my head, right? So it's
Yeah.
like if it's heart centered, if it's coming from within, and that's certainly how I uncovered my purpose, right? That came from within. And it's so different than like, well, I think I should do X and I think I should do Y, or so and so says I might be good at, well, all these people used to tell me, Wendy, you've got a great voice. You should do voiceovers. That's how I started doing them based on that. So that's totally different than looking within and figuring out what feels right for you, what feels good to you. So I think that process to me of tapping into your creativity starts with this personal journey within.
I, amen, amen, amen. And one of the things I was thinking about as you were saying that, our generation probably, and those ahead of us, but we're probably like the last generation that really, we were socialized to think, and to use our heads, right? We were not
Definitely.
socialized to feel from the rest of our body, to connect with the rest of our body. So we're up here.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about mindfulness and things like meditation, yoga, even walking, those kinds of things, that is from a different place. It's more from the physical body. And I think what causes a lot of angst for a lot of us is because of that dichotomy. We're so used to being what's logical, what makes sense. We're so used to, in some cases, what do other people think? We grew
Yeah.
up with the Joneses thing. Our parents might have been part of that, where okay, so and so's doing this, and well, I guess we'll do that, or I don't want that. What would the neighbor,
Exactly.
you know? And so when we're talking about things such as like our creativity and our creative passions, which is very personal, it's also one of those things that we're lightning rods for criticism. And what you're saying is really kind of take our mind out of it and put our heart into it, into looking at these things and giving ourselves permission. Now, once we give ourselves permission to really engage in whatever it is that we want to creatively, there's also the whole thing of confidence. There's a
Mm.
lot of people who, I mean, I've seen some people that do some awesome work, awesome, beautiful writing, beautiful art, but they don't have that confidence. And you're like, dang, if I could get you to do this or do
Yes.
that, I mean, and I can't do that from the outside, but what are some ways that you think, or at least maybe a place to start to build your confidence in your reinvention as a creative person, or owning that part of you, embracing that part of you?
I think there's a couple things that we can do. I think one, we can make a list of everything where we think we shine, everything we think we're good at, big or small. It could be from when we were kids to now. But I'm a big fan of making lists because I think we need to get perspective. I think that when we're not very confident, often we sell ourselves short and we are often much more accomplished than we give ourselves credit for. So I think doing some exercises of self-reflection to really tune in is part one. But I think what also works for me, and I really suggest to people I work with, and I think it's really, again, a parallel with this idea of really bursting into your creative side, is what I call developing a reinvention dream team. A reinvention dream team. So, a reinvention dream team is like your personal board of directors. And the people on your team, which doesn't have to be huge, it's not like, 16 people, but, three or five people that are your fans, that think you are amazing, that believe in you. Because part of the problem is when we don't feel confident, we can get really, again, as we just said, caught up in our heads about that. We can talk ourselves out of things. We don't have the perspective to say, well, maybe it's just a bump in the road and I can keep going. We don't always persist. And this idea of the reinvention dream team are these people. So you could call it your creative team, your creative dream team, right? It's these people who are there to one, pick you up when you're like, I could do this. The people who always have your back, the people that can give you perspective, the people that can be truth tellers, but that also can help you see when we can't, because we're so close to it, we can't always see ourselves and we don't have that perspective. So getting this group of people together that you truly trust and also people that believe in your dream, because Sharon, I know there will be people that will be the naysayers. Sharon, do
Oh,
you
yeah.
really, right? Do you really think that's a good idea, Sharon? You're X number of years old. Well, I wouldn't do that if I were you, Sharon, except of course you're not me. This is my dream.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Owning your dream. Definitely.
So those
I
people will help us, along this path. That is a way to build our confidence.
I think that's a wonderful ideal. I always believe in as a creative, we, a lot of the work that you do as a creative person, whether you're artist or songwriter or writer, a lot of that is done in isolation.
Yes.
And I always try to encourage people to make those connections, whether it's an accountability partner, which I think is part of your dream, your reinvention team,
Yes.
someone that's going to help you be accountable. Okay, submit your work for that exhibition, um, sign up for that open mic, and I'm going to be there to rah-rah you, having those people around. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. When we're in connection and we're just coming out of a period of where we couldn't be as much physically, and so it does
Yes.
take a little bit more of an effort, but when you have the right people in your circle that can counter any negative thing that might have been said or done that discouraged you or made you feel less confident, I think that's important. And um, I'll dare say that, when you have someone that says something negative about what you're doing, pay attention to that, because sometimes, people that come from that direction is coming from a lot of different ways, but sometimes it's just jealousy because you're pursuing something that they might have, maybe they didn't want to pursue exactly the same thing, but you have the courage to do something that they feel they don't have the courage to do. And I
Exactly.
have stories on that one.
I bet
But
you do.
yeah,
I
but
can
anyway,
imagine.
well, it's been such a joy to talk with you. How can people find out and learn more about your podcast and in the work that you do? Because I really recommend everyone follow this woman because she really has it. And I think her
Thank
enthusiasm
you.
is just like, oh, just, a shot in the arm for me. So
Oh, thank you
find out
so
about you.
much. Well,
You're welcome.
basically, you can find me anywhere on the internet. I'm everywhere. And Number one, you can go to visit my website, reinventionrebels.com. And you also can find out about I've got this great free audio that's called Five Questions to Spark Your Curiosity and
All right.
inspire your reinvention rebel journey. So because I think so much of both creativity and reinvention to me
Same
is
thing.
about being curious, right? It's like
Absolutely.
I feel like that's the place to start. But you can also find me, you can find my podcast on all of the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, you name it. And of course, Sharon, as we are connected on social media, I'm all over social media on Instagram at Reinvention Rebels. That's also my Facebook page. I'm on Threads at Reinvention Rebels. You can find me on LinkedIn at Wendy Battles. So there are ample places that you can find me, follow me. I'd love for you to reach out and say, hey, I heard you on Sharon's amazing podcast. Let's
Yes, yes, yes,
connect.
yes, yes, yes. And I will be on her podcast soon. And I'm not going to share too much about what we'll be talking about yet, but that
That'd be
announcement is
great.
coming soon.
I
But
love it.
yes. So thank you so much, Wendy. This has been an honor to kind of get to know you and your positive message. And I have people like this because I tell people a lot of the same thing, but I think sometimes you need to hear it from someone else,
Yeah,
that I'm not just making this stuff out of the sky, or I'm just like,
exactly.
yeah, I'm the coach and all that, but I really think it's important to hear these positive messages because this is the time for us at midlife and beyond to shine and to embrace who we are and to embrace our creative selves. And you don't have to you don't have to look to those messages or anything that might have been planted in you earlier in life that told you you had to approach things differently. This is the time at midlife and beyond to shine and to be who we truly
Yes.
are and to rediscover our passions. And so hopefully this episode was helpful for you. And if this was something that you enjoyed, please click like and share, write a comment or two. And also remember to visit my website and follow me. I am at sparkyourcreative.com. I'm on Facebook as Spark Your Creative Coach. I am on YouTube at Spark Your Creative. I am on Instagram at Spark Your Creative and also on Threads now. So I look forward to hearing from you and hopefully that this was a positive message for you. Thanks again, Wendy, for being on the podcast. And thank you all for listening. Take care until the next time.